Sorry. No, that's okay. I just, for those of you who haven't been to the museum before, just so you know, right around the corner here, if you go straight, there's a bathroom and there's also water fountains. I know that we can't bring our water up here, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started here then. So my name is Melanie Landsittel. I'm the graduate assistant here at the Department of Learning and Engagement at the Stanley Museum of Art. I also am a graduate student, I guess, obviously, because I'm a graduate assistant, a graduate student in library science, and I also am doing a certificate over at the Center for the Book. I have a MFA in visual art, like in printmaking and textile art from the University of Kentucky, and yeah, I also have a bachelor's degree in art history from Chatham University, which probably none of you know. But anyways, yeah, thank you so much for coming here today. I'm going to be giving a little lecture/workshop thing called Using Our Archives for Artist Research, a practical guide to museums and special collections, archives, and research creation processes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's going to be a few chapters to our workshop today. The first one is a deep dive into this phrase called research creation. And then also I'm going to give you all some practical information about how to access and most importantly browse like museums and special collections databases. So how to kind of just tools for how to use those databases more efficiently as artists. And then also do a little workshop element. You'll see there's some pencils at the table and notepads and some worksheets and stuff for like a little log, and we'll get into that. So the workshop element focused on developing lines of inquiry for your research as students and faculty at the University of Iowa. And then I also just want to mention that there is, if you didn't see, right next door to this one, there's our visual lab, which has a little pop-up from some amazing librarians from special collections came over and brought over some cookbooks that I looked at while I did that, and there's also a lot of photos in here of when I was doing some research projects here with our databases. So it's also connecting to a show that I have left that I curated from our works here at the Stanley Museum of Art called Without Work There's No Collage or Sweets. So yeah, please go check that out and say hello to librarians after the talk or like whenever you want to. And that's going to be up. I think they're going to start packing their stuff up around 12:30. Yeah, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So, what is research creation? Has anyone heard of the phrase research creation before? No? It's kind of weird, it's kind of niche. But once I learned about it, I was like, whoa, this is so helpful. More people need to know about this. So first, what is it? It's the idea that artwork is created through a series of inquiries into a variety of resources, okay? So it's kind of trying to create structure and a framework for thinking about how we develop as artists and develop our ideas and our works. So from the self, from history, literary text, historical, contemporary art, social situations, nonfiction writing, all these types of things. Where do we gather our kind of resources and our inputs as artists? And how can we use this kind of framework of research creation? This is basically to validate and support information-seeking behaviors as artists. It's a framework for writing and speaking about our practices. So this is something that can be kind of tricky being a student or an artist working at an R1 institution, a research institution like the University of Iowa here. We have frameworks for talking about and validating research in the sciences and in the communities and things like that. And this also connects to how we search for resources, because a lot of times it's difficult for us to write about our research practices, our methodologies and things like that, which we do have, we just don't talk about in as literal terms as other disciplines. And so this is just kind of framework for you to kind of help in those types of situations when you need to be able to do that. And not only that, but it also helps kind of, I'll get into this later, but it kind of opens up for us ways that we can use the resources here better that we have. But yeah, and I wanted to mention too on this slide, how I found out about this concept was from this conference that I went to in April called ARLIS, which is the Art Librarians of North America. There was this session with these these artists and librarians who work in these Canadian universities. One's at the University of Alberta, and I think another one's at another university kind of close to there. Their names are Sandra Cohen and Angela Hewitt. And they talked about this concept of research creation for first, as librarians, how are they supporting the ways that artists need to use their databases? But then kind of also talking about how it's applicable for them as artists to just be able to talk about and write about their work in this way for applying for grant funding, especially through the Canadian grant system. This is a phrase that's used, but I think it's also just a structure that we can use as artists here for writing and talking about our work. Yeah. So, and then I just included, I have a bunch of images in here that are just works from our collection, so if anything is interesting to you, feel free to jot it down, but I just thought this, this etching of this woman doing some research is inspiring for this slide. So, again, it's a very simple idea that research creation is just the idea that there is a process of development from which ideas form. So our ideas that we have as artists are not just flying from our heads into our hands, and it's not just this serendipitous kind of thing. It's there is a process that we go through. We do have databases of research, whether that's and I'll get into kind of what those things that we have are. They're just so much more abstract than what we might often think of as research, that it's hard for us to put those into words. But one thing that also I found really validating about this concept is that there is a difference of inputs and outputs in research creation. So you don't have to have a literary output. And I think that is the hard thing about research as an artist, is we don't necessarily have a literary output. We might have literary inputs or visual inputs, but we might have visual inputs and visual outputs, right? And those are still valid sources of research and creation of research. And here I have this phrase, functions of interdisciplinarity. And this is kind of the idea that artists use specific outputs or specific materials to achieve, or to achieve certain things in their artwork. So if you want to talk about, the history of craft in Appalachia, and you want to do a series of tapestries, that might be more applicable than doing a series of writings or a series of drawings. You know what I'm saying? You're using specific mediums for a reason, and that augments the concepts in your work, what you're trying to communicate, because we're communicating visually, so obviously what we're using is important to us. Also, a foundational text that I'll just mention in this concept of research creation is called How to Make Art at the End of the World, a Manifesto for Research Creation. And this is a book by Natalie Lovelace. I have it at the end of my slides. If it's something that interests you, it's in the research or the further reading section in the slides at the end. But yeah, a lot of texts that talk about research creation reference her because she's kind of the original coiner of this term, kind of. So she's a big one to know. Okay, so a concept that's very similar to this, that I think is just another really good tool to be able to talk about our work, especially when we're doing work with visual output, is this idea of practice-led scholarship. And practice-led scholarship is also similar to arts-based research or research creation, but I think it is a little bit different. And the example that I really like to give for this type of thing is thinking about, okay, practice-led scholarship. The physical activity is what is leading your research or your scholarship, your creative inquiry. And so the questions are coming from the practice, and the answers are coming from the practice as well. And the example that I think is really good is thinking about the difference between, if you think of historians working at Colonial Williamsburg that make butter, okay, those are historians. They are doing practice-led scholarship, making their butter and living in the little house and wearing the heavy skirts and everything. What do they understand as historians about the process of making butter that a historian who has only read about making butter does not? They understand it in different ways, right? And so as visual artists, we have to think about the value of what we know and what we experience and how that is part of our research. Yeah. Okay. So to get into a little bit of an example of from my own personal history, this is my loom. I had mentioned a little bit that I have an MFA in fiber arts and textiles from the University of Kentucky, and this is my loom from 2022. I feel practice-led research is something that, yeah, once I started to discover these terms, I feel like it opened up such a huge world for me as a visual artist in craft as well. I feel like sometimes when you're in disciplines like weaving or even ceramics or things like that, where it's like a bit less traditionally academic disciplines, it can be harder to make that connection with exactly the type of research that we're pulling from, or how to kind of write about it in a critical way. And I think kind of the discipline of like critical craft theory are things that we can use as kind of, anchors or like to get a bit of stability about writing about our work, but then also thinking about, this practice-led scholarship, research creation, and just our experience making things physically. And it's just this idea that visual art is a way of knowing and experiencing. So how many of you went to Steph Rue's talk who came to UICB? Okay, so a good chunk of you. So Steph Rue's talk was called Other Ways of Knowing. She's like a paper maker who came to talk to us at the UI Center for the book. And I just think that her whole talk and the way she was talking about how she learns about the processes in the historical, how do I put this? It's such a beautiful way to talk about understanding what we know, you know what I mean, through the processes that we're doing. So I just think that was a really good example of her talking about other ways of knowing, art making being one of those things. Okay, so I want to have you all have a little discussion at your table. So I don't know if you two are just the two of you, so if anyone wants to move to like this table as well, so we have a more even distribution. I just want you all to talk to your table for like 2 minutes about what kinds of practices lead your scholarship. So I want to try and get the gears turning, thinking about what are some ways that we can write about this in about our own work. So just feel free to talk in your group or like write little notes.
So hi everyone, I'm a second year in ceramics, and what makes my scholarship practice that leads to my scholarship is ceramics, but also I feel like and so yeah, when I was able to sort of mix those two together.
Yeah, but that is, exactly.
So I think a lot of my research has to do with not just the craft history, but also an interest
to do it more, especially for like, and it's really exciting, and sometimes like I'll learn things, whatever, and I don't even have the time to I'm very practicing in my work, but it starts to inform like information that I'm interested about, and then
because I think practice can be writing as well.
from a context or output as Melanie. So it's like
And I'm really interested.
or just context or framework. I really try to put like analog or traditional mediums with digital, so I always think about how can I merge those things together, whether it's like scheming textures or including them or vice versa. So that's kind of like a practice framework that I try to keep up. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also so
I can
Is there a way that you can like collage things that you find interesting or things that you draw like inspiration from? Like how do you keep it straight? Like I struggle with this. I struggle with that. Yeah, it's like you get like
History.
Yeah.
oh, I want to like put in an aspect of what we're doing so like you're
Yeah. I have a lot of
But there's shadows.
or I literally have a folder on my computer that's like my research, so and I literally have a document of just written links, so if I find something I'm like, oh, throw the link over there, I'll go back to it. I don't know.
I think my practice really
Yeah.
is
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, just that on the
Yeah, that is so long.
Yeah.
And
And it's like, That's a really good question. I think it's easy to force you to
Yeah.
force yourself to
Yeah, my,
think you know what your work's gonna be
yeah,
about.
my area.
But I think
It was like craft
in
and
college,
stuff,
you were so like, that doesn't work.
arts.
But like, you feel like good enough so that like after a while, there is like a system developed that kind of shows like your whether it's
I did the maintenance art.
and especially like designer to designer, there is this pressure. Designers only do one thing, which is like go every system. And as a designer by trade too. But I think designers can use the way to kind of and be like, oh, this is a good way to apply this, this is a good way, this is a neat way that we can like. So don't be afraid to look at
She did it, yeah, I really loved that.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
good question. Any other thoughts on practices?
The track series though.
What's in New York?
Oh, stuff.
Yeah. Not directly for your like what is it?
Yeah.
Why would
There's really other practices, it doesn't have to be like. I think also since
Yeah, she did this.
Yeah.
Going on.
I feel like
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
it feeds in how we understand
Yeah.
changes the way like practicing the way you
I feel I'm gonna talk about my.
think about
Because I have like 4 semester hours today.
You should.
Correct.
You should.
Yeah.
It's gonna change, yeah, it's gonna change, you just have a really, I do anyway, a greater respect for text layout, and like understanding spacing, yeah, it's really.
What I wanna do is the water also.
Or like, you know, digitally, we use the Riso printer at USC, which I encourage you to do too. And so understanding the digital aspect really helps inform how to prepare things for Riso. I think like separating colors and understanding it, it's so interesting, yeah. It does make sense. No, tape.
How a book takes up space.
That's so fun. Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. In the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a period or a focus in our history? May I ask what it is?
My main focus is in Asian papers, but
Oh,
I've been part of the medieval 3-person team, like making production.
okay, interesting. Very, very cool. Yeah.
A little bit of everything.
Hey everyone, I'm so happy that you're having a great discussion with each other. It makes me really happy to see you all sharing. Yeah, it makes me really happy to see you all sharing. Please continue these. I hate to cut someone off. These conversations later. But anyways, thank you for taking a moment to think about that because I feel like it's really important. Just to acknowledge that we're doing these things, you know what I mean? And just to put structure to it can help just a little bit in certain ways, but it doesn't have to be limiting, you know? We can talk about it still in very broad and abstract terms. So I want to just give you one more like little tool that I think is very useful for this type of writing and research that is going to help us kind of frame the way that we search for objects or the way that we're going to continue research in this presentation at least. Is qualitative research practices in the visual arts. So does anyone know like what is qualitative research? Or like what's quantitative research? What's the difference? Something like that. Yeah,
Well,
please.
quantitative is like numbers and like that kind of thing. And qualitative is more like vibes.
Vibes, yeah. If we think about research methodologies, we can divide it to numbers and vibes. And what are vibes, right? So that's great. I have this quote on here that I think just kind of points to, it's basically exactly what you said. Research methodologies which aim to eliminate the individual perspective perspective, this is quantitative of the researcher, which they have to do like for science, you know what I mean? But qualitative research approaches and promotes a practice of exploration and discovery. And I really like this quote. This is from an article called The Scholarship of Creativity. It says, led by a sense of wonder, where there's an embrace of potential innovation. I think this is a really beautiful way to think, because this is like the type of research that people do, like, in what's, like, I don't know if they use these terms anymore, so like, my apologies, but like, think about like hard and soft sciences. It's like hard science, we're using numerical data because we want to be able to put it into, you know, graphs and things like that and get like input, like straight input to output. But we don't want that level of, you know, strictness, obviously, in visual arts. So if we think about qualitative research in visual arts, we think about that we're led by anecdotal experiences. So our data is, anecdotal, experiential, it's kind of a gathering of things. And this kind of can create a reservoir for us that is our data. And how we gather that data is through whatever research methods we use. The big point here is that we're not starting with a problem. So in quantitative research, they're starting with a problem that they want to solve, right? Now, some artists work like this, where they're like, okay, this is what I want to create a work that means this. But very few people do that, right? I know artists that do that, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's very interesting that people do that. But I feel like most artists do not work that way, right? And so, if we're thinking about, we're not being led by a question that we need to solve. We're being led by the data that we accrue. Okay, so if I think about my research methodologies, I'm going to say I go out in the forest and I like taking pictures of animals. This is something that guides my research, and it's also I gather data from it because I take the pictures and I put them on my computer. When I can find them kissing, that's the best. I put those in a special folder. I also really like taking pictures of bumper stickers, which I know is kind of like a little bit like boring, but sometimes they can be really funny, and I think it just reveals something to me about other people, because it's like what you're putting on your car. It's so weirdly personal. It's just like, I heard Adrian dying. It's like, it's so interesting. It tells me something about that person. And then I put it in my little data set and I learned about other people. And kind of the main thing that I feel like I do now in my kind of research methodologies is like gathering recipes and making food. And the making of the food and also the making of the work is part of my, the experience that allows me to create that work. So, does anyone have a research methodology that they want to share with others? Feel free to just shout it out. Yeah.
Kind of in the same way I shared with you all, I take pictures of interesting textures and I put them in a folder on my phone, or I find interesting textures and I scan them into the computer and have a folder of visual textures that I like to use and manipulate later.
This is totally a research methodology to create a
I do that with type, like signboards and chalkboards and like interesting things on buses and like just the type, so it's like a visual library of.
Creating a visual library. How many people create a visual library for themselves? A good chunk, right? Yeah. Jen, what do you do? What do you do? What's your
I do a lot of quantitative stuff.
Yes, I know you
So
do.
the background in ceramics, you quantify and you measure and then you do, but, and also my paper making stuff.
Yeah.
My research methods are autobiographical. So I'm creating stories through type, composing at the press and printing it not to be legible but to be images. So my research methodology is the same as the end product, which will be a book. And I allow myself to play at the press to counterbalance the stuff that's more formal or quantitative. So you have like multiple streams like you do.
I love that combination.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's just to say, like, artist practices, it's always so broad and a little bit hard to pin down, right? And so, that's
But you have
It's
to
what
be
makes it
conscious
so-
that what you're doing, your point is well taken, that you have to be conscious that what you're doing is a research method?
You do. That's
Or
what I'm
not,
saying.
and
Yeah.
to be able to articulate it, because other people won't understand what you're doing if you can't explain it in a nutshell
And that's
to your peers or your professors or your thesis committee or the world.
exactly, and I feel like that's a really important part of, talking about researching and writing at an art institution, is that you have to be able to talk about your work to other people who don't understand it, right? And that's something that this is kind of leading into this slide. The reason why I really wanted to share this all with you is that whenever I did my MFA, I felt really like I didn't have these types of tools. And I know that these are kind of like quasi-basic things, just like some pieces of vocabulary and some ways to think about your work. But I feel like this was something that I really struggled with all through my MFA, and just trying to be able to make work that I could really articulate and talk to people about what I'm doing even the most basic thing is like, how do I get to this point? Because I feel like I always used to be like, oh, well, it's really, I like talking about nuance, and I like making things that don't make sense, and like all this kind of stuff. And there's something to do that, but also, I was doing things that I didn't want to recognize as being valuable parts of like a research kind of creation, For me, I had all these pictures, so whenever I moved to Kentucky, before that I lived in Slovakia for a few years, in Czech Republic and Slovakia, and I took a bunch of pictures of my neighbor's yard, because it was like this couple, and they had just like a normal sized yard, but it was always it was like food. It was like food from corner to corner. And it was really not a yard any bigger than this room. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world, because so many people have such bigger yards than this and don't grow food. And there's like an element to, you have to have time to grow food and whatever, but yeah, I don't know, I just found it so inspiring and so beautiful. And all these pictures, this like little reservoir of pictures, and like this, and like the kissing animals, it's like all I made work about for like 3 years. And led through the practice of like weaving and everything like that. I just feel like if I had better frameworks and ways to think about my work as research, and to be able to do research at my institution in the resources that I had, like at special collections or at the museum, maybe, I just wish that I had that. And so I feel like it's an important thing, and it's a little bit of a hole in visual arts education. But yeah, and I feel like too, what goes along with this is that a lot of artists, because we aren't really given these types of frameworks, I feel like, at least in my education, I feel like I was not. And they were just like, you need to be able to write about your work so it makes sense. And I'm like, what I'm doing doesn't make sense. It gives you a sense of imposter syndrome, right? And like, nobody deserves to feel that way because you're a researcher at this institution. It's just, we don't have, sometimes when we don't have those frameworks or those ways of thinking about our work, it can be so easy to be like, oh, like, what am I even doing? I'm just like twiddling around, like doing these weird little ancient crafts. Like, what is this for? Like, it's so easy to feel that way, but it's really not necessary, because you are doing research and you are producing scholarship. But yeah, so now I'm doing a master's in library science, and I feel like what's so important to me is trying to figure out how to merge my interest in visual arts and being an artist, and then also being like an information literacy professional. And I just wanted to, share with you all how to more easily access these resources and talk about your work. So that's why I'm doing this talk, and I'm talking about it in the middle for some reason. But it kind of felt logical. But anyways, so for me, to kind of wrap this little section up, for me, I feel like now I have a stronger framework of what are my research methodologies, and what is the nature of the research creation that I'm doing. So a lot of times I start with like a recipe, it might be from a book at special collections, which there's some books over there you could check out after this talk. But yeah, it might be from special collections, it might be from a broader range of resources I have now, or from family, or from friends, or things like that. And then I will make the recipe, which is also part of my research creation. And then from there, there's also the process of a lot of the time now I'm doing letterpress, creating like a recipe and making a letterpress broadside or a book or something like that. And so there's a lot of different elements there and experiences and processes, but they all kind of are part of my little recipe to baking experiment to artwork pipeline. But it's not even that, you know, it doesn't have to be such a closed thing. I just feel like the framework personally helps me to think about my work. So, and we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit to move into the second part of the talk, which is like physically using the resources that we have here and just show you all how to get into those databases. So I just want to open this question up to the group about why we would want to even see physical artworks from a museum or, excuse me, or from special collections. What makes primary sources useful to you? Why do we like seeing art in person? What is that for?
For inspiration or to understand how something was made and you're trying to recreate it or kind of do the same processes.
Totally, you want to learn about the material. You want to see it in person. Yeah.
I think if I were to bring like one of my ceramics classes here, it would be to inform like some of the similarities of the processes that we're using, but also the difference in like sort of like ties to like different economical situations and like, societal expectations on like aesthetics and stuff.
Totally, that makes sense. Yeah. Movie.
I'm really interested in like optical toys and early cinema devices, and you know so little. Like I'm trying to like rebuild a lot of them myself, and that information. So going to special collections and seeing these objects in person helps me kind of like reverse engineer how I would make it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know from like looking at a picture online.
Totally, you get so much less information in the picture. Do you want to ask that?
Yeah, so as an art historian, seeing work in person gives you so much better sense of how, like the corporality of the artist as they work, the sense of scale,
Oh,
the
yeah.
particularities of style that digital images just don't, even the good ones,
Yeah.
you don't get the texture, and so it's a much more generative as a scholar.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like all I kind of like, it's like so much more you have the experience with the person who made the thing, right? You get like the sense of scale, the line, everything like that kind of sense. It's like that experience of kind of being in the room with the object and like how it was, just experiencing how it was made. Exactly. I feel like so much more too. It's like, you can't really have you can have a good experience with an artwork seeing it on my favorite artist is Agnes Martin. Does anyone know Agnes Martin? If you look at her work on the computer, it's like,
It's just
nothing. Like, but when you see it in person, it's like I went to the Des Moines Art Center recently, and they had Agnes Martin there, and it was like one of these like gray and white ones that if you saw it on the computer, it wouldn't look like anything. But when I saw it in person, I like almost cried because it was so beautiful, and it was like the hand of Agnes, like all these little lines and everything. It's like that kind of experience is so valuable, and not even just for like, oh, emotion's so beautiful, but also like you all are saying, it's very useful for research as well. Okay, and I just have this slide in here to say that not everything you find will be relevant to your research, but that does not mean it does not have the power to influence you or to make you laugh, to inspire you to be playful. And that is why having a breadth in your search is really important. So we're going to always search from broadest to narrowest terms, because you want to grab stuff like this. I saw this when I was looking through various databases, doing research on Robert Artisan, and this like made me laugh so hard when I saw it. But yeah, and then I just made it my desktop at work because every time I open the computer, I just start laughing. And it's like that kind of stuff. It's also part of being an artist. Like it's your whole. This probably informs my work in some way. Like I don't know. But anyways, okay. So now I'm gonna get really into the nitty gritty. This is gonna be like kind of quick. We're gonna run through some like helpful tips for browsing, helpful tips for creating lines of inquiry, and then I'm going to show you all how to get into these databases and just how to request objects and everything like that. So anyways, the thing that is tricky with using closed stacks as an artist is that we want to browse, but we're not allowed. Right? That's the thing. And so So how do we kind of help ourselves? What should we do as artists to create better ways of researching so that it's not so tricky? Or so it is tailored more to us. We have, more curiosity and material-driven research versus question-driven research, which makes researching in a database more difficult. Observation and browsing is always part of their inspiration, right? You just want to look through a wide range of things. So I have this quote here from the Harvard Live Guide, which made me feel really good about being someone who just likes to go in the library and just like look around, which kind of seems like a slightly superfluous activity, like not, I'm just like, but it is part of your research. They said, browsing the text is not just a favorite pastime for academics, but rather a strategy that many students and scholars employ as a part of their research process, both as a means of discovering new resources and exploring new topics. It's completely valid. So, I do want to mention this. Whenever I was browsing through or kind of looking through, I just had like a search term like vegetarian in the Zachary collection, which is our collection of cookbooks over our special collections. And this cookbook came up called the Golden Rule Cookbook, 600 Recipes for Meatless Dishes. And that was all the information I got. And I was like, okay, I'll pull that, I'll take a look at it. Turns out, this book is like a massive book that was made in like 1909 or something. It's like a very old book. Maybe not that old. No, probably with the photos, not that old. But it is old. I can't remember. Maybe it's like 1960, I don't know. Sorry for giving false information. I remember it was some weird number. But anyways, it's a big, kind of older book. And the whole reading of this book, or the whole process of this book, it's a reading of the Bible that is kind of claiming that God wanted everyone to be vegetarian. Which I think is, as a vegetarian, I'm like, I love this. Two, as like, if you read the Bible, like, that's not true. But also, I thought like it's such a wonderful, like, such a weird, there was all this extra information in there that I had no idea that I was going to find so interesting and funny. And there's this image here that says, a carnivorous animal and her prey, and it's this little girl with 2 cows. Anyways, so this kind of thing is like, pulling a wide range of objects can be really useful and important. So, first, to start with developing lines of inquiry from browsing. So, we're going to start with, what you want to do is, when we're thinking about how to take our research into these databases and pull stuff that's going to be useful for us, one thing that I feel like is very useful is starting in the open stacks. So open stacks here would be like art library. I think I get into this in the next slide, but yeah, think about what resources you have available to you first, like in the main library. And going through trying to find keywords, subject headings, going in the back of the book, finding, because a lot of times in books they'll be like, oh, this is further reading. These are looking at the resources and something that might be kind of useful to you but isn't exactly what you're looking for. This type of thing. That can be very helpful to generate keywords that are going to be informative to your search. Also, creating a research log. This I didn't learn about until one of my coworkers shared this concept with me. Maybe some of you have done this before. Literally, I'm a master's in library science student, and I did this for the first time, like earlier this year. So, but this, feel free to take one of these, and we're gonna get into kind of like filling it out in a little bit here. But this is a research log. This can be so useful just to keep track of the key terms that you have, and then searching them in the database, different databases, and then figuring out, what is useful to you, what results you have. Just keeping track of that so that you don't have to restart all the time. Can be very useful. And like I said before, searching from broadest to narrowest terms is really helpful. So if you want to search for like food-related art, you might just do like food, and then you do like fruit, and then like raspberry, and then seed, stuff like that. You can go. Neat. One thing I really want to mention is that in the library, it's slightly different because they have a bit more resources for finding things and describing collections. So our collections, we also have at the Salem Museum like a broader page with some information. But there's these things in the library called live guides and finding aids that some of you might be familiar with these terms. These are things that you can find on the library website that go with each collection. So just keep those in mind, those might be helpful. And I also asked the librarian over in Special Collections, what do you think would be helpful for artists, researchers to do? Like, would you have some tips for them? when they're coming over there, and she was like, you know what, they need to ask us for help because I'd love to help them. And there's this little button on the Special Collections website that's like, ask a librarian. So just know that like, they're literally there to help you use the collections. And I know probably people have heard this like 100 times, but like, don't be shy, just ask them. Be like, you know, I was really looking, I'm interested in this, do you know of anything? Because they're gonna know the collection in a way that like, would be so hard for us to know just through looking online. Okay. Anyways, oh, here I have the economical bread rolls. These are my economical bread rolls that I also made. I just thought I would throw that picture in there because I thought they were kind of pretty. This one was the best one, obviously. Okay. Anyway, so really specifically about what we have here at University of Iowa is that we have the art library, so OpenStack, art library. The museum gallery is also an OpenStack, if you think about it in this kind of way. The main library, the music library, the Penncrest Museum Gallery, Hardin Library, and there's other libraries too. I just put these ones here that I thought would be useful. So just keep in mind that those are there as well. And then, so as far as overlap between the museum and special collections, whenever you're looking through for instance, the digital library, which we'll get to, whenever you're looking through the digital library, you might find works that are in special collections, you might find ones that are here at the museum. And basically the main difference is, like, to keep it kind of broad, is that when you request objects to view here, you can't touch them. And yeah, and there might be works there by the same artist. So like Lil Picard, we have like works by Lil Picard here at the Santa Museum of Art. Her papers are at special collections, so you might find some drawings of hers and things like that over special collections. There's also a bunch of artworks over special collections, like in the Sackner collection, and artist books, the miniature books, all those types of things. So there's artworks here and there's artworks there. But yeah, it's just two different groups. And so just keep in mind that that's kind of like the main difference when you're experiencing it, that you can touch them there if you want to leaf through things. And then as well, we have in special collections, probably some of you are familiar with kind of the breadth of resources we have. I just put these here just so you know that there's a lot of different archives that you can use to search. There's the Iowa Women's Archive, the LGBTQ+ archive, the Iowa Archives of the Avant-Garde. I had never heard this before, but I talked to a librarian and apparently this is like an overarching theme. Some of you are nodding your heads, yes. For some of the archives that they have over in special collections, there's like the International Data Archive in there, and the Sackner Archive, the Artist Book Archive as well, and the Digital Library. I have these on these little, please take one of these. There's like little QR codes here. These things, some of them are easy to find, some of them aren't easy to find, especially the one for the Santa Museum. For our collection, so yeah, please take one of those. But yeah, so I just wanted to show you here too. This is the Iowa Archive of the Avant-Garde website. Here they have the Data Archive and the Sackner Archive, which are really easy to browse. So this website is a really good one. Also, the Artist Book Database. Some of these, they have every single page photographed. So I would highly recommend going through here. You can search through materials, book cloth, clay, all this kind of stuff. You can search for processes, all kinds of different things. And this is a really, really great online database. Yeah.
And it doesn't work in Safari.
Now, a lot of stuff doesn't work in Safari. Do you use Safari?
I try not to anymore, but I thought there was something wrong with the database and we just have to, maybe that's,
That's a good point. So yeah, take a look at that. Also, I want to mention as well, as we're going through special collections, before we move on to the museum, that whenever you're requesting works to pull at special collections, you have to make an Aon account. If you go in the library website and you want to pull a work through special collections, it's just going to say, this is available in special collections. It's going to turn you over, send you to the Aon account. And so just make sure that you make an Aon account, and that'll be like a little special account between you and special collections. You can just like put all the little, works that you're interested in seeing into there, and then you can request through there which ones you want to see and when. But it's just kind of an extra step that I feel like it's good to mention. Anyways, and whenever you pull stuff from special collections and from the museum, you never really know the kind of experience you're going to have and what you're going to find. I pulled this book, all the information information I saw was, oh, my country pies, and I was like, interesting. And then the photo is so beautiful. And I feel like this happened a lot, where I would pull these cookbooks from like the late 70s and early 80s, and like the photos in there are crazy. And I feel like this has really inspired me in the composition of my prints and stuff like that. So now I'm always looking for these like kind of funny books like from this time period. So yeah, you never know what they're gonna look like and feel like in person. So I already talked a little bit about how to see in the museum is different. This I want you to keep in mind whenever we're searching the database. You can search by several things: the artist name, material, accession number, and in a museum we have this way that all the objects are organized by this thing called an accession number, which is basically the year that it was accessioned into the collection and the number that it was accessioned in. So like the 6th work in 1995 would be like 1995.6. This kind of thing. So that's a really easy and short way to kind of keep your works in order. Like if you want to see works or you're interested in works rather than writing out the whole name, then you can always pull them up by their accession number. And then peoples or countries or keyword. Keyword is really useful, and I think that that's the one that I always focus on rather than kind of keeping it to artist or title. Keyword is very useful. Okay, so now what I want to do is just kind of show you guys how to use this database and just like what it looks like, how to get into it. I found this I was going through my photos because I want to add some pretty photos. And I just love this. It's like a comic strip from the New Yorker, I guess you would say, but it just makes me laugh so much. So anyway, so this link is one of the QR codes on your thing. Now, I just want you all to know that this database is going to change in the next few years. We don't know when, to a different database, but I assume it's going to be pretty similar to search. And so, So I'm sure that all this information will still be useful. So, someone gives me a keyword from something that would be useful for them. What do you want to look at? Halloween? Okay. Is that even Halloween? Okay. I'm like notorious for not being able to spell in English at all, so just excuse me. So you can see over here too, this is going to change you, but it says, this is how you know you're in the right place because it says 13,258. That's not all the works that we have in our collection, but it's a really big chunk. So if it only says like 600, then you're not looking in the right place. Okay, so we searched Halloween. We got some interesting stuff that came up. Does anything really pop out to anyone? One of these?
Top right one is interesting.
The top right, this one? Okay, let's see, what is this? This looks kind of scary looking. University of Iowa, School of Art and Art History. What is this even? Okay, it's by Abigail Richards. 2005. This doesn't have a lot of information with that. I wonder if this is like a art student or something like that.
It's part of the thesis collection.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Part of the thesis collection. Okay.
Can we see those if we want to?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so University of Iowa, School of Art and Art History. Is that where we would click, Sarah?
Yeah, there's actually a website for the School of Art and Art History thesis collection. So if you open a new tab, type U Iowa and SAA thesis collection. AH. And then thesis collection. Thesis rental gallery.
Sweet.
And then down at the bottom you can browse.
Browse.
And that's all of the thesis collection.
Wow, look at that. I didn't know about that. That's so cool. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Okay, so add this to your list. Wow, this is really interesting. Does anything stand out to anyone that they want to look at? Take a look at them. Okay, so we've got a pretty high-res image. That's really nice. I wonder if this person has anything. Yeah, and that's a little better than the images on that. Okay, so the thing about the right, is that if we want to go back to searching this family, you just have to like go back to that link, because sometimes you can get rerouted to being into all collections. See what we are. Now I'm gonna click on this. Okay, someone give me a really broad, one more broad category. Or silly category.
Mermaid.
Mermaid. Amazing. Okay. Oh, come on. There we go. Mermaid. Is there an E in there? Is that right?
I mean, this is right.
That was it, right?
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I like really don't trust myself to spell anything. Okay. So whenever we're doing like a search in here, and you start with a broad term, which is mermaid, what you want to do is kind of like, or I think what's very helpful is kind of quickly going through and seeing what other keywords you can grab. So materials, any other. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, it might take a long time. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's only 3. Which one of these do you want to look at, John?
The seahorse one, please.
This one. Okay, yeah. Okay. See, like, this is something very interesting. Is this a John? It's an etching made in 1880. See, and then if you were interested here, you could check more about this artist, or you can see the support, which is interesting.
How would you call that up if you wanted to see it
So,
as a visual classroom?
thank you for connecting us to our next point.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so this is how you need to request. This is how you need to request to see physical objects. Okay, you're at the Stanley Museum, you got art. Request to view art. This is the form that you're gonna get. What you want to do is you could just choose that, like what was in there, what I said, that accession number. You could do the artist name and the title of the work and the accession number. But I think it's good if you write down the right? Is that the most useful?
That's the best one.
That's always the best. If you write down the accession number, because then you don't have to have all this extra information. And here, wait, let me just show you where that was on the other. This one, ding, 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 accession number 2006.134. If you put that in that form, you can request, and these emails go to me, and I've only ever, since I started working here over a year ago, only had 2 requests from students. So,
I didn't know this exists.
yes, exactly, that's why I did this talk, Regina. So cool. And there's really, like, almost 20,000, right, works in our collection. There's so many things that you could pull to look at, that you could experience physically in person. I just think it's so useful for artists, and please use this. Okay, so I just want to mention too that my show is over we're like pretty much done, but my show that I created called Without Work, There's No Collage or Sweets is over in the other classroom, so please go take a look at that. Please go take a look at the books that I also was really inspired by, and they were part of my research, deciding what objects to pull for those, for that show as well, and I have like a little text that I wrote about it, so please check that out. I also have here on the tables, there's a research log that I filled out that I used for this searching for works. And it's not just for this show, but also just in general for my own personal work. So if you want to take one of these as an example, how you basically use this is you put the database here. I think it's good to kind of start with, like a broad database, or if you want to start with, the artist book collection, SMA collection, whatever. But it's really important to gather your keywords that you can use to kind of fuel these and just keep track of what works, what doesn't work, what database is suitable for what you're looking for at that time, and just create each one, one of these for whatever project you're doing. Feel free to take if there are any extras or whatever, and also I can make copies of them too. So if it's something that would be useful to you. This is a further reading slide as well, so if any of the stuff that I talked about is interesting to you today, feel free to check out some other resources on that. Alrighty. Okay, then this is my bibliography. We don't have to go like that for too long. Okay, so I know there's another new workshop element, but I also wanted everyone to be able to talk, and we spent some time workshopping already. So feel free to stay in here for a little bit and work on this with this. If you have any questions for me, feel free to go. Please do check out the stuff that's over there that the librarians brought over, because they were really, really nice to bring over all those books, and they're so beautiful, and there's some artist books that you can handle, so please go check those out. Feel free to ask any questions. I think that's the last slide. Yeah, that's it. Okay.